We're focusing on that reading from the Hebrew Scriptures, the Old Testament. Just to recap, to cut a long story short, the family of Joseph moved to Egypt to be with Joseph. We all know that. And they settled down, and as the reading explains to us, they prospered and prospered and prospered. They grew numerically, they grew financially, but also they grew as a perceived threat to the existing Egyptian way of life. 400 years after Joseph, and after numerous regime changes, the existing Pharaoh and his councillors were unaware of the background as to why all these Israelites were in the land. All they saw was a threat, and what happened next is probably no different to what happened to the Jews in Nazi Germany in the 1930s. Their rights, their money, their livelihood were all stripped away bit by bit. In effect, they became non-people, fit for one purpose only, and that was as slaves to build cities. The ultimate goal by Pharaoh and his cabinet was genocide. And this is where we find the story as it's been read out to us this morning. This was Pharaoh's and his cronies' manifesto of death, his final solution to deal with the Jews. And probably it's the first recorded attempt at Holocaust. They probably segregated the Jews at first, put them into ghettos, and later they placed them into labour camps, or we know them better as concentration camps. It was an attempt, a blatant attempt, to systematically annihilate the Hebrew people. Sounds familiar? Next, we have the attempted killing off of all Jewish male babies, reminiscent of the killing of the innocents nearly 1,500 years later. Pharaoh orders that all Hebrew baby boys must be thrown into the river, drowned. But we've heard that this didn't happen with Moses. Instead, his mother hid him to keep him safe. The obvious question is, what was God doing all this time? I'd like to suggest that God was listening to the cries of his people. God's timing and plan of action don't always go with what we want. In the words of those famous theologians, Jagger and Richard, you can't always get what you want, but in God's plan you get what you need when you need it. Why doesn't God just snap his fingers and make this new regime go away? God is God, after all, omnipotent. Why does God seem to forget it? Why did God seem to forget the Israelites? This would have been the question that they were asking. But we know that God is with us in good times and bad times. It's he who directs our path, who brings blessings upon us, and who, when he sees fit, will bring deliverance out of times of trouble. To put it another way, Yahweh, God, is sovereign. He is the Lord of all history, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. He's not any less the Lord of history in times of trouble, nor do good times suggest a benevolent control of cosmic events. So what did the Hebrew people need right now? Well, they needed one man with one goal, one mission, one heart, one soul, one solution, one flash of light, one good man. man with a plan. However, in this instance, given the present circumstances, and as they were looking around, and all they could see was the Egyptian taskmasters, in this instance, it was as likely as a three-legged unicorn taking a leak at the end of a double rainbow. But this brings us neatly to Moses. We know from the reading that Moses, who by all rights should have been drowned, was saved. He was picked up by Pharaoh's daughter. It was the Pharaoh's daughter who acted as an adopted mum to Moses. And in a wonderful sense of irony, we've heard it was Moses' own mum acting as nanny who brought him up. And she was actually paid to do so. Moses was brought up as any member of the royal household would be. You can take the Hebrew out of the child, or at least attempt to, here in his upbringing in the court of Pharaoh. But his identity as a Hebrew still remained. Why? Because his nanny, his real mum, would have taught him what it was to be a Jew. She would have told him about the actions of the God of his ancestors, of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, the God of Joseph. And he would have been reminded again and again and again that Yahweh, that God, has acted in the past, is acting now, and will act in the future. Now, not much is known about the early life of Moses as he was brought up in the court of Pharaoh. We do know that Moses would go on to do bigger and better things. His journey is just beginning. I mean, it is the beginning of Exodus. But to go into that, we need another sermon or two or three or four. Suffice to say, the Moses story doesn't end right at the beginning of Exodus. And just like Moses, we too are on a journey. And God says, I am here. I am with you. Foolishly, we ask the question as if the answer should come to us once and for all, so that if God proved his existence thunderously enough, we would never ask for reassurance again. But he won't. And even if he did, this story from Exodus teaches us that we ask again anyway. God, prove yourself, show yourself, again and again and again and again and again and again. What the Israelites really yearned for, what they really hoped for, was not a God that was out there in the cosmos, but a God that was right here in the messy particulars of our lives. And we ask again and again and again, because we need to know again and again and again, is God among us now? Now in all circumstances, now in the middle of this pandemic, now where it seems that there's no end, where we've been told that there might not be a vaccine until the winter of next year. Now when we've been told of the various, well, not quite lockdowns, but severe restrictions of movement in the northwest, and the outbreak of more cases in Scotland, and people in the southwest being worried by the number of holidaymakers going down there. Is God among us now? Is God among us with and in the furloughs, the redundancies, the non-payment of rents, in the parched marriage, in the gut-wrenching diagnosis? Is God with us in the abuse, the shrinking paycheck, redundancies, lockdowns, and perhaps an untimely death? Is God among us or not? And it's the only question that matters, really. And to ask it is to register our need, our yearning and our hope. To ask it is to journey into a new freedom, knowing that the God of both hard times and good times has compassion enough for our questions. And I don't believe there's any other faith that has that capacity. As it turns out, God doesn't need our hard questions in order to answer our summons. God, where are you? To our perpetual surprise, he shows up freely and stands before us. He's given us a man with a plan, Jesus. He is with us in the incarnation. He is with us in the cross event. He is with us in the resurrection, now as ever, willing and waiting with an outstretched hand. For God is love.